Yesterday, the question was raised by Steve, and the question was, back in chapter 48, verse 12, it says that when Yosef was sitting with his brothers, with his father, it says that he was holding Ephraim and Manasseh, and it says, Vayotze Yosef otam me'im birkav, that Joseph took them forth, and Rashi translates that to mean that Yosef removed them from his knees. Hutiam Yosef mi'im berkav. Yosef removed them from his knees in order to position them. So this implies that they were sitting on his knees. And we asked the question yesterday that how old were Ephraim and Manasseh? And we assumed that they must have been, since Yaakov was in Egypt for 17 years, they must have been in their 20s. So nobody puts their 20-year-old kid on their knee like an infant. So how do we deal with that? This was an issue that Steve raised, and it was very distressing to me that I didn't have an answer. So we spoke to a lot of people. We did some research. And we came up with 4 basic different approaches to this. Okay, to this very, very important question. Steve, Rabbi Steinsaltz, we said yesterday, said that they were obviously young. And that was based upon the fact that it says that he took them off his knees. But the problem with that is Ephraim and Manasseh seem not to have been young. So one approach is from, if you look at Onkelos says, so this approach is really a question on Rashi, because Onkelos approaches this by saying, he says, in verse 12, Apek Yosef Yaton min kad mohi, that Joseph led them out from in front of him, meaning to say, not from his knees, but just the word birkav does not mean his knees, means from in front of him. That's one answer. That changes the word. Well, we thought birkav, it usually means knees, here it means from in front of him. That was the approach of Onkelos and also Radak, that they translate from the knees, meaning not from the knees, but meaning in front. Okay, a second answer, which was sent to me by my son Roey, he found an answer that says that Joseph was very, very strong. And so therefore, since he was super strong, he held them on his knees. Okay. The third approach is that it says that it's a mystical approach, meaning to say, it's not talking about something physical, that he's producing them mystically, meaning to say, he's coming from his loins, like Joseph brought them out mystically, and he spiritually and mystically. So again, it's a metaphorical approach to this word. And then the fourth approach, which I found to be the most interesting for me, was the approach of Rabbi Yoel ben Nun, who argues that the verse actually is taking place right when Yaakov came to Egypt. Right when Yaakov came to Egypt, Yosef introduces them to his children, and that story is only recorded here because here is also the place where Jacob is about to bless all of his sons, and so therefore it's written out of order.
Out of order. That's what I think is the right answer.
So you and Rabbi Yoel ben Nun you're how do you say Pake Yoel ben Nun, Steve, in accordance in agreement with Rabbi Yoel ben Nun. That it seems right. The Torah doesn't have to be written in chronological order, but the problem with that is it seems that Joseph brought them to his father just before his father died. Because it says, "Behold, your father is sick," but it's not necessarily the case that it was just before he died. He might have gotten a false alarm that his father was going to die. He thought he was sick, and then the later story is happening 17 years later. So it's possible that this story takes place right when they come down to Egypt, and then Ephraim and Manasseh could indeed have been very young.
How old was he when Jacob was presented to the Pharaoh?
It says, Jacob says, "I'm 130 years old. The years of my life are few and bad." Somebody out there? Oh, it must be him. So, yeah. So,
what evidence do we have that they're not younger?
Oh, well, the evidence we have that they're not younger is that they were born before the famine. Jacob only came down after the famine had started, 2 years after the famine. So Jacob was down there for 17 years. So they're born at least. Well, no, but the famine stopped, let's say, after 2 years. So Jacob came down after 2 years of famine, and they were born before the Shnatayim Ufnei Rav, 2 years before the famine. So therefore, they're born 21 years old. The younger one must be at least 21 years old. So,
What do we know about their functioning thus far? I don't feel like we know much.
so the Midrash seems to indicate that Menashe was the one who functioned in the court, and Ephraim was the one who functioned as a Torah scholar. But that's based upon the Midrash. That's all we know about them.
Just back to the opinion about illness. You said
Yeah.
yesterday that, or the day before, that Yaakov prayed to be sick.
I didn't say it, Rashi said that.
Yeah, but I'm saying, but
The Gemara
So-
says it, but Metzia
at the end of the
87a.
Parasha, when it says about the embalming, the people who are doing the embalming are called Rofim. Why would you need Rofim if there's no death and no illness? So I'm saying that they're called Rofim, so
Well, that's not a question. The word Rofim might mean something else completely there.
no, but the Torah doesn't use that word. Like the other time that it's mentioned is in Mishpatim, where it says about somebody being injured. So,
Yeah,
so
but
I'm try-
maybe they were
I'm trying to support
psychiatrists.
the opinion that it was a false alarm because
I see.
they didn't know what illness really looked like.
Very nice, very nice. Yeah, I see. Okay, so Seth, we just gave 4 answers to the question. We just review them very, very briefly. One is that it means the knees means it was in front of him, not on his knees. Another one is they were on his knees. That Yosef was super strong. Third approach is it's just a mystical meaning he brought him up from his soul. And then the fourth answer is that, and that's what we've been discussing so far, is that it happened out of order. And actually, Ephraim and Manasseh were very young. It happened right when Jacob came down. As Rabbi Yosef was saying, it was a false alarm. They thought Jacob was going to die. He was very sick. He actually died 17 years later. Problem with that is it says at the beginning of the portion that Jacob was in Egypt for 17 years. And then afterwards, it says, and it was after these matters that they said to Joseph, behold, your father is sick, which implies that this whole passage is taking place after the 17 years. So that's a
It
little.
would explain why he said, who are they? If he had never really met them, it would say he didn't know.
Oh.
Remember that Torah says, who are they? That would be a solid follow-up for that.
That's a very good point. That's a very, very good point. Because he just said that these are your 2 children, and then he doesn't say, and then he says, who are these people? So, okay, it's tricky. It's not clean passage. What? It's a very good point Seth has made. And okay, so we're going to now continue. Chapter 48, verse 17. Vayar Yosef ki ashit aviv yad yamino al rosh Ephraim. And so Joseph saw that his father was putting his right hand on the head of Ephraim. Vayitmoch vayira b'einav. It was bad in his eyes. Vayitmoch yad aviv v'asir otam me'al rosh Ephraim al rosh Menashe. And he picked up his father's hand to move it from Ephraim's head and put it on Menashe's head. Rashi says, "Hey, Rima me'al rosh beno t'macha biyado." He lifted Jacob's hand and he supported it and moved it. So, Vayomer Yosef el aviv lo kein avi kizel b'chor sim yimucha al rosho. And Yosef said to his father, "You're doing it wrong. This one is the firstborn." Meaning Menashe is older than Ephraim. Put your right hand on Menashe's head. Vayimain aviv. His father refused. By the way, that's the same word that used about Joseph when he refused the advances of Potiphar's wife. Vayomer, and he says, Yadati b'ni Yadati, I know my son, I know. Gamu yela'am.